Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last few years. They are still a relatively new addition to the Swedish beer scene, but they have built a very good reputation for themselves in that short lifetime. If people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also for their big, fruity, juicy, modern Nordic smoothie, whatever we're going to call them, sour beers. So if those are two beer categories that catch your fancy and you're interested in Swedish craft beers, this is one of the breweries that you really need to check out at the moment. They're doing some lovely stuff in my opinion. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget. It's a style that we've had from them many times before, one that I know they can do very well, and I have heard very good things about this particular beer as well. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we review the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. But for this review we are going to return to the wonderful Fermenterarna, or the fermenters as it would be known in English. But this particular beer is called Blooming. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this is another New England hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokalt och Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for May of 2023. They also released a single IPA as well, which had really nice artwork, but it was the double that just kind of caught my eye. And I have to admit, when it comes to Fermenterarna, I enjoy all the IPAs that they do, but the doubles have always been the ones that kind of stood out a little bit more to me, I would say. And that's not just because I'm Scottish, I just like the slightly richer flavour that you get out of these ones actually. But yeah, like I say, heard good things about this one. Let's crack on and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. I think the last one we reviewed from these guys was one of the sour beers actually, but there wasn't a sour beer released this month unfortunately. But yeah, let's do this. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fermenterarna before, and we will no doubt have more from these guys at some point in the very near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I review beers from the areas that you look for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other things. That is going to be added to quite a little bit over the next little while. And as always, you can check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, which are always very nice. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit more about Fermenterarna once again. So, Fermenterarna, as I've told you before, was founded by Niklas Aronsson and Anna Claesson, who founded the company together back in 2018. So the brewery was originally based in Strömstad in Västergötland, which is a bit to the north of Gothenburg, very close to the Norwegian border actually. Meant to be a very pretty fishing town, so somewhere that I would like to go and visit at some stage. But both of these guys had a slightly different way on their journey toward brewing craft beer. So apparently Niklas ordered a beer in a bar one day without really knowing what it was, and it turned out that this was the Tropic Thunder from Dugges Bryggeri, which for me is the kind of cult classic Swedish sour beer. That was a collaboration, of course, with Stillwater Artisanal from Maryland over in the US. But Anna, on the other hand, had a long interest in things that fermented. She also ran the restaurant Kostos Trädgårdar, and she's done things like sauerkraut, sourdough bread, you name it, she's played with it and fermented it basically. So yeah, two quite different journeys when it came to brewing. But when they got into home brewing a little bit, they found they really enjoyed it, and they decided to take their efforts commercially. So the brewery started out with a small 200-litre brew kit and tanks in late 2018, and they took a break to expand the company after their beers were received very well at the various different festivals that they attended. But after this, They had a new facility with two 500-litre brew kits and a total tank capacity of 17,000 litres, and they brewed somewhere in the region of 50,000 litres over the course of 2019. But at this point, they said they had the equipment to brew 250,000 litres of beer per year. But a little bit later on, in August of 2021, they moved to a new brewery in the Hisingen area in Gothenburg. They took their equipment with them, but they also got a new 3,000-litre brew kit later in the year, and they're opening up a restaurant and tap room there very soon, from what I understand. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes for them. But according to Untappd, these guys have produced around 175 different kinds of beer as of May 2023. And like I said to you before, these guys are known primarily for their kind of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also their kind of modern sour beers, the big juicy, fruity, smoothie, Nordic, whatever we're going to call them, sour beers too. I have seen that they've released one or two lagers in recent times, but they haven't come through Systembolaget yet, so I'll need to keep an eye out for those and see if I can get a hold of them somehow. But I would love to try a West Coast IPA from these guys and some stouts and things like that. I think they have released one or two stouts over the years, but yeah, it's mainly IPAs and kind of fruity sour beers that these guys do, to be honest. But yeah, these guys are very good at what they do, but I would love to see them try a few different styles. I think that, for me, would be the goal for these guys going forward. But that is everything I can really tell you about Fermenterarna for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at this beer itself. I'm curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. But you can see the artwork on this one is very similar to what we've had from Fermenterarna before. Obviously you get these kind of minimalist white cans with a little bit of nice artwork on the top. You can see plain gold top on this one, which I think is really nice. Then you've also got the Fermenterarna symbol on the back there, which I think is quite nice. It's like I always like this little touch here with the kind of airlock on these things, which is pretty nice. But like we said earlier, this one is called Blooming, comes in at 8% ABV. It's a New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. This one, from what I understand, is hopped with T90 and Cryo, Citra and Equinaut. I think the T90 is pellets, if I remember correctly. But yeah, both of these hops we know very well. Both American. Citra comes in about 14% alpha acid. It's going to give you those lovely big kind of juicy mango notes, but also a big lemony limey character. But Equinaut is one that seems to be making a bit of a comeback recently, having disappeared in favour of Motueka for a while. But it's about 12% alpha acid, and it gives you this big kind of juicy limey type character. So yeah, this one is should be really quite nice actually. I don't know if I've had Equinaut in an IPA from these guys yet. But this one cost me, I believe, 60 Swedish kronor. That translates to roughly €6, about £5.50 sterling, $6.50 American, something like that, although the exchange rates have gone up and down a wee bit in recent times. The Swedish kronor is a bit weak at the moment, for sure. But yeah, anyway, 8% New England Hazy Imperial Double IPA from Fermenterarna. We know these guys can do well with this style, so let's get it out. We'll get on with the tasting and see what we have in store for ourselves. So let's get this guy poured and see what it's all about. There we are. So there we are. This looks very, very nice. Yeah, so this is poured pretty much as you would expect from any kind of New England hazy, modern, whatever we're going to call them, IPA. But yeah, before the head disappears, you can see that this beer poured with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. That is fading away to just be a thin foamy layer. It's going to leave a nice little ring around the edge of the glass there. But there you can see a bunch of smaller bubbles. Just kind of, you can see a bunch of smaller bubbles there, just sitting on top of this one, which is very, very nice. But yeah, in terms of colour of this beer, this is kind of what we've seen from Fermenterarna before. Their beers always tend to be quite bright and yellow actually. So for me, the colour of this one just reminds me of a nice mango juice. I always like comparing the appearance of New England IPAs to different fruit juices. Just what it reminds me of. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil plays a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect the colour as well, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to different kinds of IPAs, mainly only fruit IPAs, to be honest with you, and maybe to a degree black IPAs as well. But yeah, the level of haze in this one is pretty nice. It's not the soupiest and gloopiest of hazy IPAs that we've come across before, but like I say, it does look pretty damn nice. Remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use as well. It can vary from brewery to brewery and recipe to recipe. That's it. Yeah, it does look pretty nice though in that sense. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look pretty nice and pretty much as you would expect from a New England hazy IPA. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the appearance of this one, to be honest with you. So let's have a wee look at the aroma and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Very curious. Oh yeah, this smells very, very nice actually. Yeah, this is good. So I mean, in terms of the aroma of this one, this is quite typical from what we've had from Fermenterarna before. I've often found that their New England IPAs are quite oaty leaning, but can also have this kind of little bit of farmhousey, kind of yeasty type character to them as well. And quite often they'll vary the wheat and the oats a little bit in them, which is always interesting. I think I'd be very curious to know what their creative process is for these beers actually, and how they choose to play around with things, if they choose the hops first or the malt base or what they do. But yeah, this one is very nice. As I've explained in many New England IPA reviews before, for me there are 6 elements to the flavour and aroma of a New England IPA that you should think about. So the first one would be the kind of yeasty farmhousey character, and then you have the rye leaning grainy side of things too. Those are a little bit more prominent in American brewed New England IPAs, I would add, like the kind of old school ones like Alchemist and Lawson's and so on. But then you have the wheaty bitiness, the oaty creaminess, the barley malt bread, and also the sweeter side of things as well. And these of course are more common in the European brewed ones. But it's kind of how the style has evolved, I guess you could say as well. But this beer for me shows you a little bit of, and Fermenterarna do this as well, they do show you a little bit of the kind of farmhousey, yeasty side of things in their beers. But yeah, this is very, very nice actually. So you've got a nice mix of yeast and malt in this one. You've got quite a bright green component. You've got the lovely kind of juicy, fruity characters. But I would add, this one seems a little bit more kind of citrusy, if that makes sense, than some of the other ones we've had, particularly on the top of the nose, but you still have that smooth, tropical, fruity note that you kind of expect of Fermenterarna, to be honest. But yeah, let's break it down and just describe it a wee bit more kind of in depth for you. So, yeah, the backbone of the beer with this one for me, you've got a lovely little bit of that kind of fresh, white bready bread crust character. That, as I say, forms the backbone of this beer, which is very, very nice. So lovely fresh white bready bread crust in there. As you move a little bit further forward with that, you can feel there's, you know, as the aroma kind of progresses, you get a little bit of a Jacob's cream kind of cracker note out of this one. There are little elements of woody character in there as well. And I do get a wee hint of like a kind of, I do absolutely get a little hint of a kind of fresh, kind of brown bready, wholemeal bready character coming out of this one, which I think is very, very nice. So yeah, aroma wise, this beer is certainly quite interesting for sure. Yeah, we can get rid of this. It's probably affecting the camera a wee bit. Yeah. So for me, you get that nice little bit of brown bready character in there, but above that you start to get the fluffy white bready notes. And I've always found that the Fermenterarna beers always have a little bit more cracker and a little touch of brown bread in them, which I think is a nice touch. It's almost like an ode or a bit of a tribute to the kind of original New Englands, if you like. But yeah, for me with this one, you get lots of fluffy white bread in this one. You can smell the wheat in there as well, kind of smoothing the beer out, but also like kind of giving you a little bit more of a kind of bite. There's a little bit of bitiness, a bit of wheaty bitiness in the back of the nose too, which is really very nice. And then you get a lot of kind of nice oaty character out of this one as well. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how fresh this beer is. It's always, the Fermenterarna beers are always released a week or two before Systembolaget through Glassbank and things like that. And I think that's when they're basically just canned, to be honest with you. So yeah, this one probably will be in fairly good condition at this point in time. But yeah, the thing with New England IPAs is you can use the oats as a kind of rough measure of how fresh your New England IPA is going to be. I mean, whether it's, if you get a little bit more oaty creaminess out of it, that means it tends to be fresher, whereas if the oats are a little bit drier, that means it's a little bit older. But that's just a very rough measure. So just keep that in mind. But for me, this beer still has a lot of its oaty creaminess, but you can smell a little bit of dryness from the oats just kind of pushing its way through. On the sweet side of things, this beer does have a little bit of like a Werther's Original butter candy type note to it, but it's not overly strong, I would say. So that's quite nice actually in that sense. A little bit of that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing, but like I say, fairly mild in that sense. But yeah, I mean, when it's 8% ABV, you do expect a little bit of sweetness. But this one, for me, comes across as being a little bit more oaty with just a little touch of sweetness. That's probably a fair way to describe what this beer's doing, to be honest with you. So yeah, I like that. I do like that about this one for sure. But yeah, I think that covers the malty and yeasty side of the beer, to be honest. The only other thing to say is that you maybe get a slight little touch of like McVitie's digestive biscuit out of this one, but I like it. On the hoppy side of things then, for me, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness comes out of the beer. When we talk about the green component, there's a little bit of earthiness in there. You've got a good little bit of like, you do have a good little bit of a kind of floral aromaticity to this one as well. It's not too deep, it's more of a bright floral aromaticity, a little touch of spiciness to it. Then you've got some nice kind of citrusy, grassy characteristics pushing their way out of the beer as well. So yeah, the way that this one goes together in that sense is very, very nice actually. Yeah, interesting stuff for sure. I do get more and more woodiness out of this beer the more that I smell of it, right enough. One other thing to remember about IPAs is that you always have three types of hopping in these beers. And let's use 90 minutes as the example to explain these. So within the first hour of the wort boil, you have early addition hopping. So that gives you mainly bitterness. You've got more time for the hot water to basically extract the chemicals from the hops. So yeah, makes kind of sense. And the aroma, that translates to a more deep, dank type of green component. You've got late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil. That gives you a little bit of bitterness, but also some nice flavour and aroma as well. And in the aroma, that translates to a kind of brighter and more, kind of just, yeah, more brighter green component. Then you've got dry hopping, which comes after the wort boil is complete. That's all flavour and aroma, and that does the same as late addition hopping. You can kind of tell from the aroma of this one that this is a lot of late addition and a lot of dry hopping. And generally speaking, New England IPAs rely on that. They rely on late addition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs use all three, actually. But yeah, in terms of the fruitiness in this beer, the green component, as I say, is very bright in this one. In terms of the fruitiness coming out of this beer, you have a really nice, you do have a very nice kind of juicy kind of tropical note out of this one. We know that it's Citra and Equinaut in this beer, and there's Cryo in this one too, which is always going to give you a little bit more of a wetter fruitiness and a wetter green component. But for me, the it's interesting because you're getting the juicy mango that you often get from Citra, but I'm getting a little bit more of an apricot-y and pineapple-y type note out of this one. But you've also got a very juicy kind of limey character coming out of this beer as well, which is very, very nice. So yeah, I'm getting, when you take the aroma in, like at the front of the nose, you get this very, very bright kind of limey character coming out of it. So yeah, I do like how that pieces together in this one. Actually, it's a really interesting combination of things going on in this particular beer. So it gets a thumbs up from me, definitely. Yeah, quite a lot of limey character, but as I say, I'm quite glad that Equinaut's making a bit of a comeback because I haven't really seen it around all that much over the last wee while. But yeah, and really nice, another very nice smelling New England double IPA from Fermenterarna, and I wouldn't expect anything less from them, to be honest with you. These guys are a brewery that I always keep an eye out for with the local releases But yeah, we've got the rest of it out into the glass now. As I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in. But I think we should try this one now. So this one is the Blooming, an 8% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, from Fermenterarna in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's very nice actually. Gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah. Now this one, I will say, it's definitely up there with the standards we expect of Fermenterarna. But I will say this is one of the ones that they've done where I think the flavour that I'm getting out of this one, to an extent, diverges from what I was expecting it would be in the aroma. This is a very creamy and thick, oaty leaning New England IPA, and that's not quite. I was expecting something just a little bit more kind of yeasty and things from the aroma, to be honest with you. But you do get that in the aftertaste. The flavours that you would expect come out in the aftertaste when the beer kind of dries out a little bit. So that's a really interesting point to make about this one for sure. But again, another really, really nice beer from these guys. Fermenterarna really know what they're doing with this style, in my opinion. Yeah, big, thick, oaty, creamy New England IPA, lovely, juicy, fruity notes in there, and then the green component's just got a nice little bit of brightness to it. So I like that. I really do like this. Yeah, let's break this down then and describe it properly as we always do. Middle third of your palate then. Backbone of the beer, you've got that lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust coming out of this one. You can feel that is absolutely the backbone of the beer. As you go toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you start to get a little bit of woodiness in there, and you've got a lovely wee bit of kind of crackery character coming out of this one too, which is nice. But the crackery notes aren't quite as prominent in this one as they are in some of the other New Englands that we've had from Fermenterarna before. But then above this, for me, there's a little tiny little bit of a slightly sweet wholemeal brown bready character. Then you get this lovely, fluffy but still quite dense white bready character in there. And above that, you get the wheaty character. And the wheat gives you a lovely smoothness to the beer, but it really adds a lot of density to. There's quite a little bit of density to the wheaty character in this one. The bready notes in this beer, as I say, are quite heavy and quite dense, but I really like this one. Definitely, from memory, this is one of the kind of smoother and creamier and slightly thicker New Englands that we've had from Fermenterarna over the years. And that's one of the things, as I say, this is what makes me very curious about Fermenterarna's creative process in their beers, if you like, because, you know, I'll try these beers pretty much every month, and then one month you'll have one that's a little bit more wheaty and bitey, the next month you'll have one like this which is oaty and creamy, then you'll have another one the next month that will be like more bitter and things. So like I say, I'd just love to know what if they decide, oh, we're just going to make a more bitter one this month, or whether they're like, oh, we've got these hops, we can get these hops now, let's do something with this. But yeah, as I say, you'll always get a solid New England IPA from these guys, definitely. But anyway, we talked about the wheaty layer, and the wheaty layer in this one is really quite smooth actually. I expected it to have a wee bit more bitiness. But above that wheaty layer, you've got a lot of oaty creaminess to this beer, and for me, the oats really kind of dominate this a little bit. So down the middle line of your palate, you've got this lovely, smooth, creamy, oaty character there, and as you move out toward the edge of the edges of that middle third of your palate, you start to get a wee bit more dryness and things coming out of it, which is great. So yeah, the dryness that comes out of this beer, I think, is is really, really nice in that sense. You just get that little bit of oaty dryness in there, and then the more creamy notes in the middle. This beer is interesting too because in the dead centre of your palate you've got that lovely kind of sweet, kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of note, and then just a tiny little biscuit around the side of it. But this beer really isn't overly sweet for me. It gets a bit sweeter the further into the aftertaste you go. But this one really relies on the kind of oats and the kind of creamy character rather than anything else. And there's maybe just a teeny little hint of like vanilla or something the further into the aftertaste you go with this beer from the oaty side of things. So yeah, I think that covers the middle third of your palate quite well in this one. So yeah, interesting stuff. On the on the back third of your palate, then the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in this one for sure. So yeah, nice little bit of bready build up in there. Kind of like quite a dense white bread once again. And on the back third of your palate, you can feel the layers of flavours that you're getting are quite similar to what you get in the middle third of the palate, but they just come out in different densities. So the bread crust is a little bit kind of drier in things, and as I always say, you get more bitter and dry flavours further back on the palate for sure. But yeah, you've got that nice kind of, you've got that more kind of dry bread crusty character in there. You've got a good little bit of a kind of Jacob's cream crackery note coming out of this one as well, and then above that you get the more fluffy, yeah, you get a little bit of that kind of sweeter brown bready character in there, but you can feel the flavour. It's just a little bit taller and a little bit more airy, and then above that you've got a more, you have a little bit more of you do have a little bit of a more kind of fluffy white bready character to this one. You can feel it's the same as what you had in the middle third of the palate, but just taller and more airy. And then above that, you start to get a more, you start to get a little bit more of the wheaty character there. And again, the wheat is actually very, very smooth on the back third of the palate and just has a little touch of bitiness. But above all of that, you start to get some of the yeasty notes. And for me, the yeasty note is like a very smooth white bread. It's not anywhere near as farmhousey and grainy as you can sometimes get, but you just get a little touch of honeycomb kind of wrapped around it. And for some reason, I always get a little bit of honeycomb on the top of the back third of the palate in these beers. But definitely, back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, you can feel the flavour just squashes together that little bit more and kind of condenses. But yeah, I think that covers the malty and yeasty side of this beer. Let's have a little look at the hoppy side of things then. So, back corners of the palate. So yeah, back corners of the palate for me in this one, you have a little touch of earthiness in there, but really not very much. But as you move further forward, you can feel you get this lovely oily floral aromaticity, and it just gets a little bit more and more intense as you move toward the kind of front corners of the palate, and then it has this little bit of spiciness to it there, which is great. But as I say, it's quite an oily, it really is quite an oily green component that you get out of this one, and that'll probably be because they've used cryo hops in this beer. But round the front curve of the palate, you can feel it is a little bit lighter and more grassy once again. But yeah, it's that big kind of wet, oily, almost juicy green component that comes out of this beer, and that is very, very nice in this one. So yeah, the green component is kind of as you'd expect. More, it leans a bit more toward the floral side of things the further into the aftertaste that you go. But like I say, you've got a lovely kind of grassiness coming out of this one too. So, yeah, interesting stuff. On the fruity side of the beer then, let's look at that front third of your palate. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there, which is nice. So lovely little bit of kind of mix of white and brown bread in there. The base of that front third of your palate, you've got a really nice, again, you can feel a little bit of the bread crust in there, bit of cracker, and then you've got quite a dense white bready character above that, but then you get that lovely kind of oily, you get that lovely big oily bubble above the that lovely big oily bubble above the kind of malty notes there, where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And yeah, as I say, I do really like how that goes together. On the fruity side of things then, at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a nice little bit of, there is a wee touch of like a kind of stronger passion fruity note out of this one, and that's going to be the Citra. Essentially, the back half of your front third of your palate in this beer is about the Citra, the front half is about the Equinox, and a little touch of the Citra. So yeah, if you work from the back of that front third of your palate forward, there's a little bit of a stronger passion fruit in there, then you get a lovely big, juicy and slightly oily mango-y character. As you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, there's a touch of apricot and papaya and things underneath, but then you get a more oily, sort of pineapple-y character. Then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, there's a wee touch of a more kind of oily, limey note coming out of this one. So yeah, the way this beer goes together is really quite nice actually. So the limey character in there is very juicy actually, which is quite interesting. You get a wee bit of zestiness off it, and there's almost a wee touch of like a lychee gooseberry sort of thing to this one, which can come from Citra actually, but usually Citra shows you it's more gooseberry, lychee type thing in the West Coast IPAs, not so much in the New Englands. It tends to be a little bit more lemon and limey in the New England IPAs. So for me, this is an interesting point about this beer, but yeah, really juicy, limey character coming out of this one, which I have to say I do quite enjoy, but quite a little bit of gooseberry underneath it though. But overall, a very, very nice beer, this one, and I certainly would not hesitate to drink this beer again. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the tasting. Let's just round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So yeah, for me, mouthfeel wise, this beer, it has a lovely, it's a mix of creamy and oily. That's one of the things that's grown on me more as I've drunk this beer. It is very creamy, but at the same time it has this big oily mouthfeel to it, which I do really quite like. On the I would say that it's kind of pushing toward, it's kind of at the bottom end of full-bodied for me. This is really quite a thick New England IPA, and it's very thick when we think about what Fermenterarna have done before. Say creamy and oily, smooth carbonation. In terms of the IBUs, I think this is like a 25 or 30 IBU beer, this one, which is quite low obviously for a double. Usually doubles have a little bit more bitterness to them, like 40 IBUs, 30 is the standard for a New England. This is a very low bitterness beer for me, but you still get that kind of green component out of this one. The malt base, like we said, you've got a bit of dryness underneath, a good bit of like slightly sweeter, smoother character in the middle, and a bit of creaminess on top with a little touch more sweetness, and then you've got that big oily fruity character, which is well balanced between the kind of more tropical notes, and it has a little bit of gooseberry and a bit more of a kind of zesty citrusy note from the Equinox and the lime as well. But yeah, overall a very interesting beer, this one, a very nice one, I have to say that, from Fermenterarna. This is kind of what I expect from them, but this really has a bit of a different vibe to it compared to what I've had from them before. Definitely more kind of creamy and thick, and also a little bit more oily, I think, than some of the other Fermenterarna ones that we've had. But this is why I keep coming back to Fermenterarna. You can guarantee that you'll get a solid New England from these guys, and they haven't let me down here. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fermenterarna as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But this one was the Blooming and 8% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Fermenterarna in the Hisingen area and at Gothenburg, Gothenburg, up on the Swedish west coast. Loved reviewing this one for you, and I hope you guys enjoyed my take on it as well. But until the next time, slange it, skål, cheers, and see you guys very, very soon.